Good afternoon. Today we are going to be talking about the Barefoot Mailmen, heroes of the Florida frontier. I'm your instructor, Mr. Mitchell. Today's lesson addresses Florida Standard SS.4.A.6.3, which is to describe the contributions of significant individuals to Florida. This painting is entitled The Legend of James Edward Hamilton Mail Carrier. This was created by an artist named Stefan Dahanos in 1940 as part of the New Deal effort by the government to put people to work in the years following the Great Depression. So the government basically had a contest to see who was going to win this very lucrative contract, which was to create 6 tempera paintings about James Edward Hamilton, who was one of the first Barefoot Mailmen, and we'll talk a little bit more about him and what happened to him in a moment. The Barefoot Mailmen tie into a line on page 329 of A Land Remembered by author Patrick D. Smith. This is where Glenda McIvy is speaking to her husband, Zech McIvy, and they're talking about Miami, Florida, and she's talking about her experience speaking with famous early resident Julia Tuttle, and she says, and they have mail service too. A man walks barefooted all the way down the beach from Palm Beach and brings it here. Before what was called the Star Route, which is the route they took to deliver the mail, and the Barefoot Mailman, there was no regular mail service to any location south of Palm Beach, Florida. You could get mail irregularly from private companies or private individuals that had to cross to the West Coast, sail around the state, and bring the mail in through Cuba. These deliveries took about 6 to 8 weeks, and they could also be very expensive. At this point in history, there were no roads or trains south of Palm Beach. There was really nothing there in terms of infrastructure. And the Atlantic Ocean south of Palm Beach was very rough in that area, which made it hard to sail through. The land was undeveloped, which means it hadn't been tamed, and it was populated with rattlesnakes, panthers, alligators, and bears. The seas were teeming with sharks, and the route was full of mosquitoes and other flying pests like flies. And here is another picture of the Legend of James Edward Hamilton Mail Carrier series. This is one of the 6. These can be seen, by the way, in a post office hanging in Palm Beach, Florida. Now, the Star Route was the route that they took to deliver the mail, and the people that were delivering it eventually were called Barefoot Mailmen. The first of them was named Edwin Ruthven Bradley. He won a contract to deliver the mail for $600 a year, which at the time was a lot of money for 1 year. But you might also remember that that's how much that Sol McIvy made just selling baby buzzards in Palm Beach. Edwin Bradley's son, who was 18 years old and named Louis, was his backup. The route was 68 miles long. They walked most of it, but in some places they would row or sail small parts, usually to get through an inlet. The only place they could easily walk was along the beach, where the waves washed up onto the shore. And just to keep from getting wet, they'd roll up the legs of their uniforms, and they carried their shoes over their shoulders. At the time, they were called beach walkists or beach walkers. They weren't called Barefoot Mailmen until a book was written about them in the 40s, in the 1940s, excuse me. They would walk 6 days a week. They'd walk Monday through Wednesday to get from Palm Beach to Miami. Then Thursday through Saturday, they'd turn around and walk back to Palm Beach. They took Sunday off to rest. They lost some of their pay if they were late, or if they didn't make the route at all, and they had to make the route no matter the weather. When it was hot, when it was windy, when there were thunderstorms, no matter what, they had to make this route. This is a modern map of Florida showing the route that they took from a modern perspective. So now on the map you can see all these highways and everything looks straight and neat. But this is just a modern map. Back then, there was nothing like this, and they had to walk most of the 68 miles on foot without any shoes on. This is a timeline of the Barefoot Mailmen. It starts in 1872. That's when the area that is now Palm Beach was settled. This would one day be the starting point of the Star Route. And like I said earlier, mail south at this point took up to 8 weeks, and it had to be routed through Cuba by sea. Then, in 1885, that's the year the Star Route began. That was when Edwin Ruthven Bradley, got the first contract to deliver mail, which paid him $600 a year, and he was the first barefoot mailman. However, on October 10th of 1887, a mail carrier named James E. Hamilton, you may recognize that name from the paintings that I showed you. Well, James Hamilton disappeared on his route, and he was presumed to be eaten by alligators. And then on January 23rd, 1892, that was the day that the Star Route ended. And after that date, there were no more barefoot mailmen. So you may be asking, well, why is this important to Florida history? Well, the Star Route and the Barefoot Mailmen made it easier for people to move to Florida because there was going to be mail for them. To move to South Florida. And mail service is very important because it links civilization together. If you can't get mail, then you can't pay your taxes, you can't get reliable news, you can't do things that are your civic responsibilities, like going to vote or going for jury duty. And the Star Route ended in 1892 because there had been enough people moving to South Florida that they were finally able to convince big investors to build roads and railroads to go to South Florida. And that was names like Henry Flagler, who was mentioned at the beginning of A Land Remembered, Julia Tuttle, and Henry Plant, who were some of the people that developed the area we now know as South Florida. And so, in a way, the Barefoot Mailmen actually succeeded themselves out of a job. They did their job so well that they didn't need their job anymore. Over the 7 years that the Star Route existed and we had Barefoot Mailmen in Florida, there were 15 Barefoot Mailmen. And the reason for that is that every mail person signed a 1-year contract, and then they had to include 1 or 2 backups, people that they knew would be able to do the job for them if they couldn't do the job for whatever reason. But the way they got these contracts is by applying for the job. They had to write a letter and do an interview to convince someone that they were the right person to do the job of being a barefoot mailman. And in this activity, that's what you are going to be doing today. This activity is called I Want to Be a Barefoot Mail Person. And in order to convince someone that you should be a barefoot mail person, you're first going to have to demonstrate that you understand what the job is and what you're going to have to do in order to get the job. Because if you don't know that, then you may start the job and then realize, wow, I just don't want to do this anymore. It's hot, there's lots of bugs, I get rained on all the time, all sorts of things. So you are going to have to, in your application, show that you understand what it takes to be a barefoot mail person. And on the application I have provided you, you are going to have to fill out some fill-in-the-blank questions, showing that you know how many miles the route takes, where the route begins, where it ends, and how many days you are going to be expected to deliver mail on this route. Now, that's just one part of it. You're also going to have to demonstrate that you know what to expect from some of the hardships of being a barefoot mail person. And so you are going to fill in the end of the sentence, I understand that the route is dangerous. The dangers of the route include, and you are going to put in 3 examples of things that I have said in this demonstration, in this lesson, to show what the dangers are. So you know that there could be alligators, or you could get sick, or you could drown, or any number of things like that. The final part of this application is you are going to convince the person who is reading this letter that you're the right person for this job. You belong on the star route, and you should be a barefoot mail person. You're going to fill out the sentence, I have skills that will help me deliver the mail. Some of these skills that the job requires include, and you're going to give 3 examples of skills that you have that are going to be helpful in this job as a barefoot mail person. So maybe you could say, I'm used to walking without any shoes on, or maybe you'll say, I'm a very good swimmer, or maybe you'll say, I'm not afraid of alligators. Any number of things. You are going to put 3 examples on this application so that we know that you should be a barefoot mail person.